Joining me now is leading child psychologist and adjunct fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs, Clare Rowe. Clare, you're behind a landmark research paper for the Institute of Public Affairs called Climate Change Anxiety in Pre-Adolescent Children, a neuroscientific and psychological perspective. And you've revealed here an alarming increase in climate anxiety among Australian children, which you found is linked to the way that climate change education is currently delivered in the national curriculum. Tell me why the current approach is harmful.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. It is a landmark study in that sense because any research up to date has looked or assumed that the rise in climate anxiety with children is because children are exposed to the direct effects of climate change, so rising sea levels and bushfires, etc. But that's not the case of what I'm seeing in my clinic, right? I've got 9 and 10-year-olds in tears. They're in the middle of Sydney. They're not directly exposed to rising sea levels. And so this research went into the national curriculum for primary school age students that really pushes this idea of sustainability as a priority across all subject areas. And I think that parents don't even know that this stuff is kind of being taught. From 5 years old, Rita, kids have to learn about ways that they can personally contribute to almost this idea of saving the planet. And of course, for a 5, 6, 7-year-old, that's extremely overwhelming. And as a developmental expert with children, I can say they just do not have the cognitive capacity to deal with concepts that are future focused like that, probabilistic. They're very concrete thinkers at that stage. And so for me, this has been happening now for quite a while, and I've been seeing the direct effects of it with my patients, of kids absolutely paralysed with anxiety. And more than that, have this kind of sense of earnest on them or guilt that they need to do something to solve the problem.
It's just so troubling that we are inflicting this on children, really. It is child abuse in my eyes. Tell me about some of the cases you're dealing with personally in your clinic where you've got kids who are traumatised and you need to help them feel safe again.
Yeah, so for a while now in my clinic, and I've spoken to a lot of colleagues, child psychologists, who are reporting the same thing, particularly over the last 5 years, we're seeing children come in who are in a bit of a panic because they fundamentally believe that older generations have failed them. They believe the government's not listening, and they believe that people don't care about their future. And whilst we can all kind of have a giggle at the Greta Thunbergs maybe, and people feeling like they're going to be extinct, that's actually the message that some kids are internalising. And that's really plain to see when you understand developmental science with children. That tells us that children under 12 are not equipped to process these abstract issues, global issues like climate change. They're very based in the here and now. And so when you give a message to a kid, and there are certainly worksheets in that teachers can access as part of their curriculum that say things like the planet is sick, there is no planet B, kids internalise that, young children, as an immediate threat. So if they hear the message that sea levels are rising, they may think that that's happening next week down the road from them. And of course, what happens is they come back home, and a lot of this stuff is taught to kids and given ideas to children about ways that they can modify their own behaviour and their families. So I've got kids who come home to mum and dad, we can't eat the meat for dinner, we need to reduce meat consumption, we should be driving the family car less. And of course, a 6-year-old really doesn't have or shouldn't have control over their household habits. And so they're met in this kind of really vicious cycle where they don't have the power to change anything themselves, and they fundamentally think that people around them don't care. And hence they're in this state of not just anxiety, but helplessness. They really don't think that they have a future, which is awful.
Absolutely. Now, your report recommends abolishing that cross-curriculum priority of sustainability and also delaying climate education until the kids are old enough, secondary school, and focusing on the facts, the scientific facts, as opposed to all this emotive, guilt-ridden narrative that is traumatising the kids. If you could sit down with the Prime Minister or the Education Minister, what would your advice to them be?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, sustainability is what they call a cross-curriculum priority. It means that teachers are mandated to put in the topic of sustainability across music lessons, geography lessons, sports lessons, any lesson has to be fed in with this topic. So the first thing I'd say is what is the role of our education system when we're talking about very young children, and it's getting the absolute fundamental academics down, which of course we know that Australia is going backwards on a world stage with. So the first thing I would love to speak with the Prime Minister or the Education Minister about is abolishing that cross-curriculum priority. And I'd also like to encourage parents to just have a little bit of a look about what the kids are learning, because I think a lot of parents aren't aware of it. And if they are concerned about it, they can write to their local minister or bring it up with the principal and sit down and say, look, I'm a little bit worried about this, or speak with other parents. Because as long as this goes on without parents knowing, I think that that's a huge problem.
Now, before you go, another finding you had was that mental health professionals should be focused on resilience building rather than distress validation, which is just telling the kids how they feel is valid. What does that look like? So if you've got parents dealing with this and their kids are coming home and they are alarmed about climate change and all they've heard at school, how should parents handle that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Here's the thing, Rita. If we have climate change as we're recognising, an anxiety condition, these kids are coming with symptoms of anxiety. It is the only anxiety condition that psychologists and psychiatrists by our bodies are encouraged to validate their feelings and approach those symptoms as a realistic or, a valid response to what's going on in the world. Any other anxiety condition, we would, of course, challenge cognitively, we would provide perspective, we would help rationalise those thoughts in order to abolish the anxiety. However, this condition, it seems that people like me are encouraged to lean into it that I've got concerns about. So for parents, I would say, again, talk to the school, but also with your child. It's not about going necessarily too far into the science of things. It's just to try and give them some perspective and try and funnel a care for the environment back to some basics, like picking up rubbish, saving water. Like, they're all good things and we can stick to that.